Hello my lovelies, so this is Lizzie from Love From Lizi, and today I'm bringing you my 10 cards 1 kit from my April 2018 card kit. Now, as always each month, I do have to speed this process video up quite a lot, so it is 3 times normal speed. I did make these over a series of days, so you will see different nail, different rings, different jumpers, so please also excuse that. But I will jump in explaining the first card now. And so the first one up is quite a pinky card. I've used a pink card base, which I've cut to A2 on a side fold. And then I've taken some of the pink sort of ledger patterned paper and cut it down to cover the whole of the card base. And I've taken some of the wider black organza ribbon and the white satin and cut it a little bit longer than the card front, and then using the ATG gun I've run all the way around the outside of that panel. Now I'm still quite new with the ATG gun and I'm learning some little knacks as I go, one of which is when I come to the end of the pull that I'm using, I angle the ATG at a 90-degree angle. I pull it 90 degrees away from the line that I've been travelling in so that I don't get a big blob of glue at the end, and that seems to work quite well. So you've just seen me fold the ribbon into the glue, and unfortunately the ATG gun didn't really want to go on top of the ribbon for the satin to go on, so I'm just using a little glue dot here with some tweezers to make sure I get it exactly where I want to. And then again, because I used the grid mat on the black organza, I just laid the white satin straight into the middle. So now I'm able to attach this directly onto my card base, and if you line up one corner straight, the rest will follow as long as you've cut correctly. And here I've chosen one of the ephemera pieces, and I'm just using some white foam squares on the back. Now this sentiment says, "I am not perfect, but I am the perfect me," which is a bit strange to send on a card, but when you send this to someone, if they've got this stood up on a windowsill or on their mantelpiece, it's a really pretty thing for them to be able to look at and to remind themselves of what they are. So it's not about me, it's about them. Anyway, I have now laid down some sequins from the sequin mix, and I just picked out some that were in the pink, the white and sort of a charcoal grey, and I'm using a sticky pencil and some glue to just fix those onto the front, along with a little heart sticker at the bottom. And that's the end of the first card. Here's the second card, and I absolutely love this typewriter. I did say in the unboxing video that I would try to make something pretty with this one. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a card base around this typewriter. So I took a couple of inches off the top and some off the bottom, and now I'm just trimming the sides down to make it that standard A2 card size. I've kept all the little bits and pieces as well, so you'll find that I have the scraps that I have are little slithers, but you never know when they're going to become useful. And here I'm just using my Spectrum Noir sparkle pen, and I was going to be selective about what I covered over with the typewriter, but instead I ended up covering the whole thing just to give it some real pop from the back. And then I went over one of these wood veneer pieces, the Smile, with the sparkle pen as well, and then I went over the top of that as well with some glossy accents just to give it a really nice extra bit of shine. And I find that when you put glossy accents over the top of either the sparkle pen or the clear wink of Stella, it really makes them sparkle. And now I'm just using my ATG gun, and if you watch, you saw there my hand sort of jerked off to the side. But anyway, right, so I've laid the card front down here, and I'm running a couple of peel-offs in 2 different widths, the middle width and then the skinny width. You will be able to see these a little bit better at the photographs at the end, and I just trimmed those off with my scissors. Please do excuse my voice. I was convinced that I was suffering with the flu at the weekend, but it only seemed to hit me really hard for about 24 hours. But I have been left with this awful blocked nose at the top, so I sound a little bit like I'm underwater. Anyway, I'm using some glue here just now to stick down my wood veneer, and I'm being very careful because obviously the glossy accents is still wet, as is the way that I make all of my cards. I very rarely have a plan to start out with, and with hindsight I would have put the glossy accents on once I'd fixed it onto the front of the card. But it worked out fine. And so that's the second card. It's very simple, but it's just a nice way of using those larger images. So this is my third card, and I'm using some of the specialty white pearlescent, and I cut a die tag out from it, and any die tag would do for this. I just wanted a nice big tag. You could even cut it with scissors, to be fair. And here I've chosen a green card base, and I'm using it's sort of like a mint polka dot or confetti piece of pattern paper, and I just cover the front over, and then use my scissors to cut around using the card base as the guide. And now here I've just laid my tag into my MISTI, and I've picked up the stamps We Are, and I use my anti-static powder tool and my Versamark to just stamp We Are. And I did do it a couple of times because on the pearlescent cardstock it is quite difficult to see because it's so shiny, it doesn't absorb anything. And here I'm using the chocolate Nouveau embossing powder, and I've heat set that up because I don't have a rose gold embossing powder and I didn't want to use gold or silver, so I thought the brown was a little bit muted and it worked a bit better. I've picked 2 of the ephemera feathers, and then I used some foam squares on the back of those just to mount them up, and I've also picked a little tag which says On a Journey, and then I'm again using foam squares just to pop that up underneath the We Are, and then I am wet gluing some of the little flowers again from the ephemera just to sort of decorate the edge of the tag. And then using my scotch tape, my little mini one, I'm just mounting that tag up, and I put some on the other side and I put a little bit at the top in the middle. Now I'm sure it would have been fine, but if I decide to mail this, I don't want it to get, bent or damaged out of shape. So then I pop that into the bottom right hand corner, and that's card 3. That might be my favourite. I really do like that card. Card number 4, I am using some of the black cardstock from the kits. Nearly made a mistake there with the measurement because I'm so used to doing the top folding cards, but then I cut it widthways to make the side fold, and then I use my Teflon bone folder just to score it down the middle, which on black Teflon is great because it doesn't leave a shiny mark. Here you'll see I've used an embossing mat with a die that's a lawn fawn die just to create this quilted background on the card, and I've taken some of this pattern paper, and I think this is my favourite patterned paper from the kit this month. It is so very pretty, and I did actually have an idea of what I wanted this card to look like, and it looked absolutely nothing like it in the end. So it's sometimes they happen by mistake. Along the borders there of that pattern paper, I'm just running another set of peel-offs just so that you can see that they work on obviously both the light cards, like with a typewriter, and like this. And now I'm just picking some of the flower stickers, and I'm just arranging them over the top of the patterned paper as if the patterned paper weren't even there really. And just filling in all of the gaps. And I was going to do this as a side fold, but then I changed my mind and wanted to have a different orientation so that I could have a bigger sentiment, and I've chosen Dreaming Big, which is one of the stickers. And then I sort of, with the smaller ones here, I'm just filling in around the edges. Now, to make this look more organic, I hung 2 of the smaller ones off the side of the card and then snipped the edges off, and I find that it makes it look a little bit more grown up, I suppose, a bit more finished. And then I went over the Dreaming Big and all of the small flowers and the centres of the flowers with the Spectrum Noir sparkle pen. I love a little bit of sparkle, but this is a great 1-layer card now. So for postage wise, I know in the States you get charged extra, whereas over here we don't, as long as they're not too heavy. So anyway, on to the next card now. So I'm going to use the other half of that black cardstock. And I do have a side fold this time, and I've picked a piece of the patterned paper, which is like the raindrops, and I was thinking about doing it with the correct orientation, but it would sort of ruin the pattern on the back, which was quite nice. So I went with the raindrops going sideways, and why not? It's a card, we can do what we want. And I've taped up 3 sides of the patterned paper and then put some straight onto the card base because I knew it was a bit longer. Rather than sitting there and measuring it out, this way there is glue exactly where it needs to be, and that little piece that I've just cut off hasn't been glued, so it's ready to be used on either side. And here, this is where, as you can tell, I make all my cards on the hop. I'm pulling up the patterned paper, which thankfully, where I hadn't pushed down too hard, it wasn't too difficult. And I'm laying in some of that black organza. I just fold that around the edge. I am using the lines on the grid mat as a sort of guide. It's not perfect to use the grid mat like that because obviously there's the black side pieces of the card in the way. but you get the rough idea. And now I'm just popping some of my foam squares up, and I tell you, I am so happy that I've got these in the shop, because I've been using these ones from a local shop to me that have been dreadful, and I just bitten the bullet and thought, you know what, I'm not using them anymore. I don't enjoy them, they irritate me, and I've got all these lovely ones, so I'm using them. Anyway, I was going to put this little banner as a path coming down from the front door, but it was a little bit wide and it didn't really sit right with me, so I've just wet glued it straight onto the ribbon, and I popped an acrylic block on it to hold it down whilst it was drying, and then I popped a little bit more wet glue on a couple more of these little flower ephemeras, and then I popped the acrylic block on there for a few minutes, and then because I've used the Spectrum Noir pen in this 10 cards 1 kit, I don't feel bad to keep using it. Please excuse my head. But I've just gone over the features of the house. So the window, the little chimney, the door, just to give it a little bit of sparkle. Okay, card 6, and I'm back to doing the top folding card bases. I'm using the blue this time. And I do this exactly the same for every card base. And I know I don't show it, but it's just to sort of try to keep the time down, because I know these are long videos to sit and watch in one hit. But this one, I'm really pleased with how it turned out, because I thought this could end up being a hot mess, but it actually came good for me. I was actually very pleased with it. So I knew I wanted to use that tassel trim to give some inspiration. So I laid it onto the card front, and then using my pencil, I've marked on a piece of the patterned paper how far down it needs to come to hide the trim, but to allow the tassels to show freely. And then this is some of the white pearlescent specialty cardstock from the kits. And I'm doing the same again, and I do measure a little bit over, which is wasteful, I suppose. However, it just means that there's not going to be any opportunity for people to see any of the blue card base underneath. I love putting coloured cardstock into the kits, because I can remember when I used to be a kit subscriber, when it was just white card in there, I was a bit, but I like having coloured card for my stash. And if I wasn't making 10 cards 1 kit videos, I probably would keep all of the coloured card and use my own card. But I want to show you that you can use all the card that comes in the kit. You don't need to use extras. But I think white cardstock to go with this kit would be great, because because the imagery is so lovely and colourful. You don't need it. But anyway, I'm digressing again. So I have trimmed down the white pearlescent, and then I've popped some ATG on the back of my patterned paper at the bottom, and I've laid down the tassels directly into the ATG. And now, because this is the back, I'm using washi tape, which isn't the prettiest in the world, but it will hold it, and I'm doing it in 2 lengths. If you try to tear the exact right amount, you come into trouble. So I do one on one end and another piece on the other end, making sure they overlap in the middle, and then I know that both ends are very well secured. And now, using some of the Scotch mounting tape, this is just my little roll again, I cover the back, and I do actually go over the top of the washi tape, which is a little bit bulky, but I didn't want to double up on the rest and then do that as a single, because it would have made it too bulky for sending. So I have done it this way, and it looks fine in real life. And this was me trying out different colours. So I turned the hello over to the back so that I could see what the colour would actually look like on the wood. And to be perfectly honest, these oxides did really well. They stood to their colour, which is what they're supposed to do as pigment-based inks. But you do never know, do you? So anyway, I decided to go for this particular shade of blue. And I will list at the end which colour it is. I'm really sorry, but I don't have it here right now. Anyway, all done. Used some glossy accents to fix it onto the patterned panel, and gave it a nice good hold to make sure that it adheres well. Because when it's glue, you don't really wood glue. Sorry, you want to make sure that it has got a good firm press. And then I have chosen a sentiment from the stamp set, which is beautiful. And I'm using silver Nuvo embossing powder here and my anti-static powder tool. I don't leave the house without my anti-static powder tool. It makes such a difference, and it stops me from creating such a mess as well when I'm creating. As always, I've poured it over a coffee filter. It gets very easy for putting it back in. And then I fussy cut the word out I was going to leave it on a bit of a block, but it looks quite hard considering how nice and loopy the hello is, and it with the soft tassels, it was a little bit much to have hard edges. So I fussy cut that out, and again using some glossy accents, which I really need to refill this bottle. I spend half of my time crafting squeezing the bottle. It's on my to-do list. And then I just popped that straight onto the wood, and then I think, am I done? And then I think, no, I'm going to go for a bit extra. Now, what I did here was quite tricky. I'm really pleased with how it worked out, but I put little dots in between each of the tassels, but then decided I wanted to carry them down into little rows of 3. So, quick tip though, if you do this and you want to let it dry, flip all of the tassels over and to sit on top of the hello, because that would have made my life so much easier rather than balancing it around. Anyway, on to the next card. And this one is almost completely out of the colour palette compared to the kit. And I do like to do this every now and then just to show you that these kits will stretch if you want them to. And I've picked up the 2 little canvas tags, and I've pulled them. They're all stitched around the edges, but there was a few fray bits, and I like a few fray bits, but not too much. So I've trimmed those down. I've used some glossy accents to glue the little canvas blooms onto them, and then I've taken a piece of just regular twine from my stash and looped it through the eyelet holes. I could have used the ribbon that came with the kit, but I wanted to keep this as natural looking as possible, with yellow being the only additional colour. So I've drawn a line over where I would like the burlap to sit across the front there, and I've picked out We Are, and I'm using my grid mat to line them up, and I put those on the acrylic block. Now, where I'd done obviously a very rough line, I then got my pencil and drew a nice straight one in its place, and erased out the wobbly one that I did over the top of the burlap. Now, using my Versamark, along that pencil line, I'm just stamping We Are in a row, and I make sure that on both sides, so please apologise for my head there, excuse that, I make sure that I run off the edge of the card on both sides to make it look nice and organic. And then I put a few strips down of the ATG because I know how strong this adhesive is. And then using the lines on my grid mat, I lay it in, and I do pull it taut to make sure that it is nice and flat on the card front there. And then using the card base, I trim down the sides. Now, of course, it wouldn't be me without needing to pull something up here, because I decided that I wanted to put in the white organza ribbon. So I just sort of sneak up the edges of the burlap there and then pop them back down again. Again, this is the sort of thing that if you plan your cards out, you can avoid. So if you can, I recommend it. But if I plan a card, it never seems to go the way I wanted it to anyway. I use just a little glue dot there under the centre of the ribbon, just to make sure it doesn't flap around too much, give it a little bit extra security. And then I have a little banner here from the ephemera saying focusing on the good. So with the watermarked We Are on that top row, we are focusing on the good. So it's combining both the stamp set and the little ephemera pieces. And now I'm just using some more glossy accents to attach those little canvas tags onto the front, and I do put glue on both of them and drop them down at the same time so that I'm happy with the positioning on both of them. Trim down the little bits of twine, and that is the end of that card. Next card. Okay, we've had quite a lot of chatter recently in the Facebook group about sympathy cards, and they're not so much fun to make, and it's awful when they're needed. I find that if I need to give a sympathy card, I have got zero creative power. If I'm upset for somebody, I am not able to make cards. So it's good to have them in the stash, and this one I think it will work quite well. Again, this is not in line with the theme and the style of the kit. This kit is very bright and cheerful, but I'm just showing that it can be stretched. So I've taken some of the pearlescent grey cardstock and I popped it into the embossing folder, and then I've used some double-sided sellotape because it's got the embossing on it. I didn't want to use like a glue for it to come away, so I've popped some of the black organza ribbon and then some of the white satin straight over the top. and then I'm using double-sided tape and using my pokey tool. I know it's called a craft pick now, but I will still continue to call it a pokey tool. And now I often do this. If I could do a complete card front, I lay the card on its side and marry the two together. Then that way I know the edges are all nice and straight. And here on the black pearlescent paper, I am embossing I Am Here For You. Now, when using Versamark on the pearl, do be ever so careful if you're using a stamp block like I am, because it wants to slide, because it's a very shiny surface. The Misty is brilliant for this, but I mean it worked for me fine, it wasn't an issue, but also I had to stamp Here For You and I Am separately because I couldn't see it. So I heat embossed both of those in Nuvo white embossing powder, and then I trimmed it all down and I held it over the card front, and I thought, oh, it's a little bit lost. So I've picked up the white pearl and laid some double-sided tape on it so that it is laid completely flush, and then I pop that onto the white pearl. And I was trying to be stingy with my cardstock there and thought, oh, well, maybe I can use that bit up, but I changed my mind and thought I'd use the straight lines that were afforded me in that corner, and then just use my trimmer to make sure the edges are lovely and straight. The guide wire on that trimmer has been a game changer for me. My last trimmer didn't have it, but since that it's made life so much easier. I use some black foam squares on this. I know it's on white cardstock, but I think it fits a bit better if someone does see down the side of it. And I did die cut 2 of the swallows, also in that black graphite pearlescent cardstock. Use a couple of the smaller foam squares on that, and that was that card. Unfortunately my camera conked out without realising, but there is a still picture at the end of that. And now we're on to card 9. Now this is quite an involved card, so it takes a little bit longer to show it, and I've tried to keep as much in as possible. But what you've seen me do so far is I've cut down a piece of the patterned paper, and I'm covering the whole of the card base in it, and I'm using the ATG gun there just to go around all the edges, and I'm trimming off the extra. I did put the ATG onto the card base so that I knew it would be the right size. And here I'm just lining up the pink pearlescent cardstock from the kit, and I'm leaving quite a wide border all the way around. And all I'm doing here is where those pencil marks are, lining them up with the grid line and going just along there with the cutting tool. Now I've used my T-square ruler to line up a dead straight line a little bit down from the top, and then I've marked the centre using the grid mat, and then I'm using the little it's like a rectangle with little corners chomped out of it die from the kit, and I've die cut 3 equally along that pencil line. And now I'm using an eraser just to get rid of that pencil line. It was only ever so faint anyway, but I am now sticking some acetate over the back, and then I'm going around the outside on the front of the acetate, popping some little bit of glossy accents, because I've also die cut 3 in the smoky grey pearlescent cardstock, and I've kept all the little bits and pieces, and there are a lot of little dots and dashes to fill in here. And then I used some multimedia matte, and I've just squeezed a bit onto a scrap piece of cardstock from my little bin, and then I fill those all in, and that did take quite some time, so I've edited it all out. Now, using the centerpieces from the grey frames, I have positioned You Are and Loved onto my acrylic block. Now my acrylic blocks have got grid lines on, so I positioned them on one line and then used the bottom line against the bottom of the little grey panel, so that they would be all nice and evenly measured on the front there. I use my anti-static powder tool, and it's just Versamark ink that I'm using. And then because these are so itty bitty, I just laid them in the coffee filter, dumped the embossing powder on, gave the tweezers a good tap and wiped off any extra, and then still holding it with my tweezer because it would burn my fingers otherwise, I melted all the embossing powder. And then I've used some black foam squares, and I am just lining them up underneath those little framed with the acetate behind. So then the card front itself is done. So I can now turn it over and line up some foam tape. So I fold it in half, and I do this by matching up the end and then folding it up and then cutting up the centre of it just to make it go a bit further. And I line these all the way around the edge, and I'm showing this aspect here so that you can see that I fill every little gap. And then I place some more towards the bottom for additional support. And because of the nature of this shaker, because they're such small windows, usually I'd lay sequins on my card front where they would sit, but to get them in exactly the right place would be quite tricky. So what I do instead is I tip them into the whorls, but because of the colour of the pink of this pearl, I didn't want to have the dark pink sequins in, so I fish those out using my sticky pencil, and then I just place some sequins into those 3 whorls. Once I've got the amount that I want in, I stick some more acetate over the top. Again, I apologise for my head. I trim that down and I pop a little bit of glossy accents along where I want to make sure it's going to stick. Flip it over and then pop it onto the card front, and this way I haven't got to worry about the sequins escaping anywhere, and you can't see the acetate at the back anyway. So that was the end of card 9. This is now card 10, and I'm using a stitched rectangle die on some of the black pearlescent cardstock, and I'm using one of the cutter parts here, which is the little butterflies. And then with the leftover piece, after I die cut the butterflies out, there is some sentiments on there, and it says, "I am my own kind of beautiful." Now, I was considering stamping you and then R, but without the A, and then drawing an apostrophe. It would have worked, but I just decided to use the stamp set completely, and so I've lined them up in my MISTI, and I used some VersaFine black ink because I find that it gives the crispest finish. And then I stamp it in reverse, as it were. So I stamped one of a kind first to make sure it was where I wanted it to end, and then lined up the other stamps accordingly. And the MISTI is perfect for this because you can see where you're going, you know what you're doing. And now I have my "You are one of a kind." Now, and I was thinking, does this work with a picture of 3 butterflies? But the 3 butterflies are individual, so even though you may seem similar to others, you are unique. And then I used my trimmer just to trim that down. Now, because I wanted it to be in line with everything else, I laid some washi tape onto my stitched rectangle die, and then popped the sentiment into it, and then run it through the Big Shot just so it's got that stitching on the edge. I put some ATG down on my card base, which I had scored a little bit crooked, so I trimmed up the sides. And then I've put some Scotch mounting tape on the back of the 3 butterflies on that panel. And I did lay the sentiment on there just to make sure that I had enough space. And I cut a diagonal line just along the edge because there was quite a lot of pink showing. Put some foam mounting tape up behind that piece as well. And then popped it on towards the bottom on the right hand side. And now I've taken the 3 ephemera butterflies that are the same as those printed on the cutter part sheet, and I'm just using my pencil here. I fold the butterfly in half, and then I round the wings over the top of the pencil. You can do there are probably specific tools for this, and this isn't even a round pencil. I think it's like hexagonal or something, but it will work as long as you're not too rough with it. I use glossy accents because I want a really good strong hold, because I'm only gluing along the centerpiece behind the butterfly body, and I lay the 3 of them down. So it's got a nice little bit of dimension on there now. And now, using the jewel drops from the kit, I create a little line underneath the "You are one of a kind," making sure to leave the bit by the F of available. And then I pop a few more dots onto the pink area around the butterflies, and then I lay some Spectrum Noir sparkle pen just over the wings of each of the butterflies. And that is my final card. So this is my kit left over. So I've got lots of stickers. I've got a whole cut apart sheet, and I only used the one from there. I did keep that sentiment, as I say, because I could have manipulated it with my stamp set. I didn't, but it would have been possible. There is tons of ephemera, and a lot of this is geared towards planning. So it's the "I am," but they're all manipulated. You know, you can make them what you want. I've got the stamp set. I've got the embossing folder. I've got the peel offs. I've got 5 whole sheets of paper that I haven't touched, and then I haven't used a single piece of the other completely or of the specialty. There's still plenty of leftovers, and because of how big these pieces of pattern paper are, there's definitely at least another card out of it. Tons of ribbon. I've got my Nuvo drops. I've got the word happy. Oh, there's some more ribbon. I also have the 3 envelopes I didn't use, and I have both of my dies, a few more of the tassels. I have my sequin mix. So plenty more cards could be made from this if you wanted. The additional products that I use are I had my acrylic blocks, my misty tool, my paper trimmer, my heat gun, my big shot, my ATG, a T-square ruler, a couple of pairs of scissors. Then I had various wet glues, picks, bone folder, pencil. That's the distress oxide that I used. Various tapes, scissors, tweezers. I used 3 different embossing powders from Tonic, VersaFine and Versamark. I used Multimedia Matte, Glossy Accents, my stamp cleaner, a coffee filter, some acetate, and then a few sort of standard dyes, plus my anti-static powder tool and my craft mat. And so here are all the cards, and here are some still shots. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I can see that everybody's enjoyed the free add-on shipping if you're a subscriber this month by the amount of orders we've had. We've got bank holiday Easter this weekend, so shipping won't start on the 1st, it will actually start on the 3rd, but we are aiming to have all kits shipped by close of business on the 4th. We usually take 5 days, but we're working on 2. So watch this space, and I'm hopeful that we'll be out nice and quick. Check back for the design team cards because they'll be up very soon. And until next time, thanks for watching and sticking with me till the end. Take care and happy paper crafting. Bye!